Knowing your real core values is essential to a successful company as it sets the tone for your culture. Defining and reinforcing those core values is so important because the soft stuff is the sticky stuff. And it's sticky because it prevents turnover. It enhances productivity. It makes hiring easier. Well, our guest today is a total proof point for it. Cody Sutton is the CEO of Guide Energy. They are a chemical manufacturing company for the oil and gas industry. And since its inception in 2019, they've only lost one employee. And I would add that this is not an industry that typically does this very well, but they have. And let's hear how. Cody Sutton, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Kendra, thank you very much for having me.
So good to have you here. So, can you just tell us a little bit about the origin story for your company? Because it's so brand new. I mean, it's 5 years old. Like, what caused you to start this business?
Well, we were all working in a little bit larger, more publicly traded company, and we had seen ebbs and flows of the volatility of our industry. And with that volatility, you do see a lot of people coming and going from an industry and from a company. And so, going from Flow Tech Industries, where we were at, to Guide Energy Solutions, where we're at now, we really had the mindset of we want to build something that's more sustainable, that's right sized for the people, where we can flex up and flex down with the industry changes that we're inevitably going to see. And we wanted to build it on a rock steady foundation of core values. Know that we are hiring people who are cut from a similar cloth to ourselves, that have the same work ethics and principles and guide their way through the industry the way that we do. And so we did establish those core values early as a company and hired on them, fired on them, incentivized and disciplined on them. And we really found that it has made a tremendous difference to the quality of the people that we get, the alignment to the person and the role that they fulfill. And the more fulfilling we make it for them, the more sticky, as you say, they stay with us.
Yeah, for sure. I love that so much. When I started my business, I mean, my listeners are going to probably be tired of this story, but you're not, you're a new listener. So, but I mean, when I started my business 13 years ago, I was so dubious of this idea of values because like you, I came from big corporate America. I came from IBM. And I mean, IBM was a great employer, but their values, we did not hire and fire against the values. Matter of fact, we heckled them. And so, because nobody lived them, right? And I now though, I think it is the most important thing that we can do in a small business, especially, is getting really clear on that because you get the right hires that work the way you work. They care about the customers the way they care, like the way you do. They have the same they seem to have the same desires, and so it's so important and just impressive that you did this so early. What was some of the motivation for how did you get to these values?
Well, the values actually came very quickly. So as a founding group, there was three of us who founded the company. We had all worked together. We had all known each other for quite some time, and to sit down and define them, it was surprising to us how much alignment we had on what things are things corporations say, and then what things are things corporations do and reinforce and try to keep their people accountable to. And so when we sat down to define core values, there was a lot of overlap of how do we dwindle it down to the same 4 or 5 things that we really resonate with. And we had some great mentorship and guidance from people who had been there and done it before, who had started small businesses, who had grown those small businesses, and who had made successful exit out of those small businesses. And so the first time that we came together and did this was a little bit under the guidance of a mentor who said, if you don't do this, you're going to be lost in terms of early direction and early clarity of what you're going to hold your team accountable to. And so obviously one of those core values that came out of that was accountability. It was the first thing that we all said and said, absolutely got to have it. But we also came together because we thought we were working in an industry where a lot of people get really focused on their products. And I'm sure you could see that at IBM when you're taking and advancing technology in a way, you start to buy into all the things that technology can do to the customer. But in the end, we all felt like we're here to serve a customer and create value in their world. So our first core value as a company is service to others. And we feel like you find what you look for in this world. And if you know going to work or just living your everyday life, you're looking for an opportunity to serve someone else and create value in their world, you're going to find that opportunity. And so service to others is our first core value. Integrity is our second core value. Accountability is our third core value. Compassion is our fourth core value. And innovation is our fifth and final core value. And
Okay.
sorry if I went into that a little too
No, no.
early. I might have stole your thunder on a question, but those
Nope.
are our five.
Yeah, so let's do the activity of where the rubber meets the road on this though.
Yeah.
So let's take, for example, integrity,
Mhm.
right? I mean, Enron had integrity as one of their core values, by the way. So, like, how do you know you have this?
So we have a balance internally. And so we have some signs that face the outside world and then some signs that face the inside world. One of the signs hanging in multiple places of our office is integrity first, accountability always. And so integrity is never changing. It's doing the right thing is always the right thing. And so when you don't have the balance, though, to integrity of accountability, it's how do we check on people that are doing the right thing? And so we do, where the rubber meets the road, we have quarterly goal setting sessions as a company, and that is with the manager and their direct reports. And then we reinforce that with weekly messages. We reinforce it with a monthly newsletter, and then we come together to review our progress mid-quarter and at the end of the quarter to set the next quarter's goals. And so you get a lot of accountability in weekly meetings as business groups and monthly sessions for planning and monthly sessions to review that the budget and the performance to budget and plan, and then the quarterly goal setting sessions. It gives us a lot of opportunities to have conversations about what we said we were going to do and to make sure we're doing what we said we're going to do. And we also are saying what we do, right? Integrity is a lot about, hey, I'm going to tell you what I intend to do, but I'm going to actually follow up and do it. And saying what you do and doing what you say are two things that are big in our corporation for making sure that we don't promise things that we can't deliver internally or externally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So let me just call this out more to the listeners, because there are some values that are intentionally, I think, incongruent with each other, like maybe integrity and accountability in a way. They're not, those two are not necessarily incongruent. They're really balanced. Like for Turning the Corner, my company, we have family first is our first value. And then our second value is results beyond expectations. So tons of flexibility. We want you to put your family first, and you have to get the results for the
Deliver.
customers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. So I think that's another important thing. Like you can have values that are either incongruent or very complementary in your case. And it's probably really good to have that either that incongruence or the complementary nature to it. Because otherwise, I think it can be confusing, especially for values that are like integrity, where it's sometimes hard for people to define what integrity really is,
Mhm.
which is amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah. But like Enron, right, is a perfect example of having it as a value. But for some reason, they felt like the decisions they were making, they were maybe still living in that value. How, right?
You got to scratch your head on some of that. And you got to ask who is holding those people accountable,
Right.
right? Some of those, there's probably countless number of employees at Enron that were living that value day in and day out and completely unaware of some of the people that weren't. And so does the organizational chart come together in a way that you have checks and balances, that you have reviews from the top to the bottom, and make sure that you don't skip a level where there's some people who can operate in a vacuum that aren't held accountable to their actions?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned another thing that I think is a new way, and especially a really powerful way for a small business to run, which is, in my world of HR, one of the things that sometimes we get asked to do is like a performance management system. How do you give reviews and keep people on track? And for us, we're like, scratch like your traditional performance management system. I mean, the once a year review, right? I don't even think it works, because especially for small businesses, I think it makes so much more sense to do what you guys are doing, where you have these quarterly goals, you're meeting weekly, you're talking about it monthly, you're highlighting it in your newsletter. Can you just expand a little bit more on like what the results have been for this kind of intentionality around your goals?
Yeah, because there was a shift change of annual to quarterly goals for us, actually. So in 2019 and 2020, we had a business plan that was what I would call our pre-COVID phase. And everything changed post-COVID. In the energy space in particular, we saw a rapid decline of activity. And we found if we were going to adapt and do some other things that took us off our original business plan to keep us busy and keep us together as a team, we needed to meet more frequently than we were meeting. And so that really in 2020 and 2021 is when we really formed the routine and the cadence for communication that we do as a team still today. A little bit of that was in principle on the EOS planning. If you've ever heard of EOS,
Oh yeah,
Entrepreneurial Operating System,
we're an
that
EOS company too.
laid the foundation for what is a real good cadence and rhythm for communication. And so that set us on the path of, okay, let's break this down more into quarterly buckets of goal setting. And the quarterly goal setting led to more routine updates on talking about in our weekly meetings where we are versus our quarterly goals versus all the other little stuff. Because there's never enough time for all the little stuff. And there certainly won't be time for all the big stuff if you don't prioritize those quarterly rocks and those things that are most important to us to designate time, resources, and attention to. And so what was remarkable is when we did that shift and went to the quarterly goal setting, the weekly meetings, the monthly updates on that progress, more holistically outside of just the business unit, but across the whole business itself, we grew like crazy. That next year, we grew 400% year over year as a company. And it was very sustained. It was very manageable. We didn't truly have to hire a ton of people to reach those results. And so, yes, we were coming out of a lull, and it's easy to climb the mountain a little bit faster when you're at the bottom. But it really set us on a path to where everything we did was digested in that same rhythm and cadence of communication. And so it made things that might have seemed like insurmountable goals to go from here to here in 3 years much more achievable. Because it was, hey, take it one day at a time, prioritize one project at a time. These are the 3 most important things to do this quarter. So let's get the time and resources and attention it takes to knock them out. And just those building blocks of one big project after another kept getting knocked down, and we kept growing as a company. And it's been up and right, thankfully, ever since COVID. So we're grateful for that.
Well, yeah. And so how do you think this is, I mean, how have you weathered the ups and downs of the oil and gas industry with this?
For a brief period of time, we actually looked pretty far beyond just the oil and gas industry. We really I wouldn't say digest, but we really simplified our core function as a company down to a smaller statement. When you come out, you set a business and you want that aha statement on the website that's here is our mission statement. Well, ours was long and it was detailed and it was pointed to a very niche function that we were performing in an oil and gas industry that's very large and very wide in terms of the applications that we have. And we simplified that down to our job is to create value through applied chemistry. It's that simple. And so we had at the time COVID came around, very little demand for our industry, but very high demand for chemical properties and chemical products needed in different disciplines. So we actually pivoted in that time. We made a lot of disinfectants. We made a lot of sanitizers. We made things that stuck to our core function of applied chemistry, creating value. And that really served us well. And it also served us well when the demand came back from our industry. And we said, hey, it's time to shift gears a little bit here. We're going to kind of lean back into some of the spaces that we were serving before as demand is coming back. And we haven't stopped looking outside of oil and gas in that same mindset. So today we're looking at different ways outside of the niches that we started as a company and diversifying our income in different ways and leaning into water treatment and other areas agriculturally that still demand chemistry, and they demand a quality chemistry that we can certainly manufacture and we can formulate and we can demonstrate the value of through testing.
It's so interesting because so many, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this advice. I have heard it a gazillion times, but be niche, right? Be really good at one thing. And
Yeah.
when people told me that in the early days, I was like, but that's like a path to bankruptcy, in my opinion. Right. When I started turning the corner, I was doing mortgage banking recruiting. It was 2011. Like it was hot, right? I mean, if I'd done that 2 years before, I would have been bankrupt because of the housing crisis. And now I'd be bankrupt again if I'd stayed in mortgage banking. But I mean, what do you think of that advice? Because it sounds like you kind of did what I did too. It's like, well, why?
Yeah. So yeah, you always hear it like riches in the niches, right? Niche
Right.
yourself down and you'll find a way to make great profit. And I don't disagree with that, but you certainly have to take that in balance was, is this thing that we're really good at still in demand? And when no one's traveling and oil and gas consumption's down and our niche was to create more oil production out of oil producing wells, we're like, well, what else can we do? And we had a very capable lab team. We had a very capable plant, and we had a very capable team of implementing new formulations to scale those formulations into production and have good KQC. So we went from an EPA registered blending site for oil field chemistry to an FDA registered blending site for personal care items and FDA regulated products. So, I think that the thing you have to do, no matter what you're selling, no matter what you're creating, is because we were at that time selling to people we had never met, products we had never sold, products we had never made, never delivered to these locations, never been to these locations. But we knew we still had to define what's the ideal client for us. And so in the oil field, we're very clear on who are our ideal clients and how do we create value for them and how do we build trust that the products we're delivering them give them value. And how do we demonstrate that in predictive testing? We kind of had to do the same thing for a whole different market. And we said, who's our ideal clients? Is it hospitals? Is it school systems? Is it grocery stores? And we picked and choose our market, and then we chose to go after those ideal clients with a strategy that said, here's the tactics that hit on these path to market with these customers. And we're very disciplined in that still today of knowing who our ideal clients are and knowing the ideal markets that we can serve. And we try not to go outside of those lines too much because that's where you can waste some time and resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think it's also really exemplary of the kind of team you have too, and that you were able to, not go into the conversation with the lab team, for example, and be like, the sky is falling, no more oil and gas production, but to really say, okay, what's our opportunity here? I mean, that's really remarkable, Cody. I'm really impressed with that because I think a lot of other businesses, really panicked during that time and didn't pivot. And that's what you did, is you pivoted.
Absolutely. And kudos to the team and a huge part for that. We came together as a leadership team and said, we're in a smaller market in the United States. We're in the middle of Oklahoma, where our headquarters is Prague, Oklahoma. And we said, we just hired 25 people in a smaller market who serve a niche role, who do a tremendous job. But at that time, it was a turning corner event for us because it was, are we going to mothball this operation that we just took the last 6 to 12 months to build and stand up and equip the plant? Or are we going to look for ways to keep this team together and say, we'll figure out what to do now until the demand where we were serving comes back? And the team made the decision together. We all said we want to keep the team together. Okay, so what can we do? Here's the 3 or 4 things that we think we can do given the equipment and the team we have. And within 24 hours, the head of our technology had come back with multiple formulations, knowing all the ingredients, which surprisingly were very common ingredients to things we already ordered, and said, here's the formulations. Here's the WHO formulations, if you remember that from COVID, and we can make those, but here's the other ones we can make. And we immediately hit the ground running on R&D. And within a very short period of time, we had met regulations, we had made product, we had done QAQC, and we were ready to sell product to people we had never met.
That's amazing. That's really cool. No, that's a really good story. And so I suppose, so let's think about where that fits in with your values. Which of those values caused that ability to adapt so quickly?
So a couple of them hit on it really squarely, right? One was compassion. We care about the people we work with. So it was hard to consider, are we really going to just go from just building this team and this idea of what we can do to saying, we got to let everyone go? And everyone very quickly, within 5 minutes, said, that's not the route we're going to take. And then innovation kicked in and we said, okay, here's the things we're going to have to go study and learn. And there are several team members that we sent on reading about all the FDA compliance and reading about what we had to do and what we would need to change at the facility, and the innovation of the lab group to say, here's what we can do. Here's the formulations. Here's how we test them. And here's the QAQC procedure for that. And so compassion was huge in that moment, but innovation was very, very rapid. And we do pride ourselves on being, fundamental problem solvers and doing it in a rapid way that's transparent and educational to our customers.
I love that. Yeah, that's really great. So let's come back around. I meant to clarify this when you said it, and I didn't do it at the time. But for the listeners that are we're listening to the EOS conversation, you may not know what that is. We are also an EOS company, so I'll just quickly explain it. There was a book that came out in 2011, written by Gino Wickman. I don't even know. Where is my book? Oh, it's right here, actually. It's sitting here on my desk. I should be able to.
Look at that.
Yeah, Gino Wickman.
Shameless plug for Gino.
I read this book when I opened my business up because it had just come out in 2011 and I really had no idea what I was doing. And so I read this book and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so we've loosely implemented what is called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is really the format for getting traction. And it includes a few pillars, including getting clear on your vision, what your people are, your systems, your processes. Anyway, it's great. So I recommend it to anybody who's struggling to get the business to really hit your goals, because it gives you a really easy foundation. And then there are people out there that will help you do it too. They're called integrators. Implementers. I'm sorry, integrators is a role. But and so anyway, there's just for any of our listeners that are curious about that, since both Cody and I are super familiar with the model. So
absolutely. It definitely brings just a rhythm and cadence to how you communicate with your team. And when you partner that with some other things you can do on the hiring side that you're familiar with, you can really find people that fits roles that are very fulfilling to them. And then you just get alignment on what are we chasing? What's the big picture goal here? What's the big annual goals? What's the quarterly goals that move us closer to our annual goals? And it's a tremendous system for starting something from scratch, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So what were some of your other systems and tools that you brought in, or, again, being that you're 5 years old, like what are other things you've done to just really get this company humming?
Yeah, another shameless plug goes to Jason Williford at Culture Index. If you're not familiar with Culture Index, it's a profiling tool. It's something that we implemented very early. Again, we surrounded ourselves with people who had been there, done that, and said, what are some things that really made you guys stand out as a business and starting up? And Culture Index is one where it's a very affordable, very, very beneficial program where you almost have like a built-in business psychologist to help you through things. But it is a profiling tool that's not a pass-fail test. You give it to someone and you get some dots back. And if you're not familiar with Culture Index, the dots are kind of different attributes and just behavioral traits of people. And it gives us the roadmap to say, this is how this person likes to be communicated with. This is how they like to work with others or not work with others. This is the pace that they like to move at. This is how detail-oriented or not detail-oriented they are. And just that balance of innovation and logic in a person's core being. And we thought this has got to be hocus pocus when we heard about it. Then we took these profile tests and then they go over them with you. And it was remarkable. It was like, who has been following us around for our entire lives? Because they were pretty spot on in some of the things that they said. And then they teach you how to use that to say, okay, now create a job role and understand how those attributes of a person's way that they like to communicate, way that they like to be given praise. Is it a big thing that they like to be recognized in front of a crowd, or is it a one-on-one thing? And understanding the person and then the role and aligning that to, the whole good to great, getting the right person in the right seat on the bus. It's a very applicable, very fast tool that you can implement in your business to get the right people in the right seats. And so when using that, we got the red flags from some of those. This is misaligned to what you're trying to ask this person to do. This is a person who likes rapid change and different things, and you're asking them to do something repeated day in and day out that's going to bore them to death. And so we implemented it. We started using it. We saw very early on how accurate it was at guiding us on how to communicate or not communicate with people, how to incentivize or not incentivize people. And it was a tremendous tool for us. And like you said, we've lost one person who went to greener pastures, who was encouraged to go to those greener pastures actually when he left the company. But it's made us a very sticky place because we all know certain things about each other and how to motivate and communicate with each other. And it's been a very rewarding tool for us. So Culture Index and EOS are definitely two big ones that are part of it. I am part of the Vistage community, which just gives you countless resources and tools to help with how to dissect and problem solve things in different ways. And so there's a lot of other tools, but I'd say the two big ones are EOS and Culture Index.
Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah. Yeah, I know I know a lot about Culture Index, and it's a great tool and for hiring, especially really good for
Oh,
opening up that, the conversations for people. And I'll say, as someone who's hired hundreds of people for other businesses, not my own, but it's a data point. It's a data
mhm.
point, and you want to also
Yeah,
dig in more too in an interview and in that process, because it can sometimes not be accurate too. So,
absolutely. You
yeah.
you have to go beyond just the data you get from there, and the intangibles in business are really what sets most people apart. You can't gauge a person's passion by reading that report or their ambition or their drive. And so when you get down to talking to people about, hey, here's what I understand. What do I not understand? What have I not asked you? What drives you? What motivates you to get up and want to do something day in and day out? And understanding that part of a person, when you have some of the data of here's how they like to communicate, you can really get great insights in the hiring process and make it to where not only is it about getting the right person in, but then it's how do I treat this person to where they want to stay? How do I complement them with team members that will work with them in a way that their strengths are iron and sharpen iron? And I think we've been very fortunate in getting exposed to a tool that helps us do that.
hmm Well, you sound like you're a pretty avid reader too. I mean, you just quoted Good to Great. You just quoted Covey. I caught that one, and
I'm
so
an avid reader. Yes, ma'am.
yeah, I am too. I
You
am too.
know, one thing that a person told me early on is like, you have got to find outlets to shut it down to where you're still being productive, but you're not pushing other people. And so I never want to burn out my team. If I was staying up all night on emails, bugging my people with questions that fill their inbox in the morning, it would not be a very positive thing. But I do use some of that time to really read and listen to Audible books, and I'm pretty avid on it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's great. So, what's one of your more recent ones that you've enjoyed? What's made a difference?
Man, there's a lot. I do love Stephen Covey. I love Peter Drucker. I love all the Jim Collins stuff. Some of the newer stuff I've been reading is more about communication. And so there's a book that literally just finished that's called Super Communicators. And I just think as a leader of any person, I mean, I love to coach. I coach my kids' football team. Communicating with them has got to be very different than communicating with my team at work with people who are a lot smarter than me at work. And so I think that anything that I can get my hands on as a leader that helps me find ways to communicate when things are good, when things are bad, is very helpful for me. So Charles Duhigg has a lot of books on communication, and Super Communicators I found very helpful.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Well, Cody, gosh, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. This was a great conversation and
Yep.
really reinforces, again, the importance of those values and then how you live them every day so that they're real. And so, thank you so much for sharing your insights on that with us today.
Hey, Kendra, thank you for having me, and I appreciate your time.